Hello, everyone, and welcome to this exciting webinar on scaling up DevOps and Virtual Agile in the new normal. Before I get started, a little bit of housekeeping rules. We are recording today's session, so we'll be able to refer to it later. There are no slides in this presentation, in this talk, because it's a panel discussion. For the best view, please switch to the grid view in WebEx. We've reserved about 15 minutes towards the end for questions. So please post all your questions in the Q&A section. All right, let's get started with the introductions. Hi, my name is Savinder Puri, and I'm based in Reading, UK. I'm a DevOps evangelist at Zensar Technologies. I'm also the ambassador at DevOps Institute, and I'm a published author. I'm a Reiki teacher, which is a spiritual healing technique that helps me maintain sanity in these troubled times. And my latest weekend project is building an Elsa castle for my 7-year-old daughter. Along with me on this exciting panel, I have my esteemed colleagues from the AA. Andy, would you like to give your introduction, please, while I switch back to the other view?
Hello, everybody. My name is Andrew Carr. I'm the head of DevOps Centre of Excellence for the Automobile Association in the UK. I'm coming to you today from a sleepy town in the New Forest in Hampshire, in the southern part of England. I didn't realise that Savinder had an interest in frozen characters as well. I have to admit that I've been doing the same over the last few weeks as well. We're imprisoned in this castle at the moment, so I might as well try and build one for my daughter. As well as being the head of DevOps within the operations team, I also have accountability for digital test and digital release. And we'll weave some of those topics into this webinar as well as we go through some DevOps discussion points. I'm pleased also to be joined by my colleague Nikhil, who's going to go through his intro.
Good evening, everyone. Myself, Nikhil Thakre. I'm the DevOps lead at the AA, and my primary responsibility is enabling DevOps at the organization with doing at org level via our Center of Excellence. I'm passionate about automation, cloud, and AI, and I like to make things work better.
All right, thank you, Andy. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Nikhil. All right, Andy, let me start with you. So I'll take you back a little bit. So what was your first introduction to DevOps, and what really got you interested in this space? You can talk a little bit about that, please.
I might go a bit further back, actually, because I think the reality is that DevOps for me didn't really become a thing until I joined the AA. But the reality is, as a technologist and a delivery leader, I think it goes a lot further back. I'll take you back to a time when I was a reservist or a volunteer in the Metropolitan Police as a special sergeant. This was going back 10 years or so. I took on a new role as a duty manager, which basically meant I was responsible for pulling together the shift patterns for around 80 to 100 officers, working out who was available, what shift patterns we had, and making sure they were deployed. And it was always frustrating to me that it was an entirely manual process. I took on it from another inspector, and I would spend probably 2 to 3 hours per week managing this process and maintaining a list of running duties. And I just thought to myself, there's got to be a better way. And like anything, you know, working in IT, you realize that there are always better ways. Everything is possible. Everything is achievable. So I got myself a Salesforce CRM license, and I built out a little CRM database of all of my team, all 80 of them. And then I made it self-service so they could populate it and update it. So I didn't have to go back to them every time for updates. And then I started to create a briefing system whereby I roster all the individual shifts in advance. They could then select those shifts. And then at the start of every week, it would automatically email them. And for me, whilst that investment in setting that up was probably over a couple of months, the rewards for me meant I didn't have to spend 3 or 4 hours a week managing that. And it self-managed itself. So that for me, although in a sense is not DevOps in the real terms of what we're talking about today, it's probably the earliest point that I can see where I recognise the need to kind of focus on continuous improvement. And then I think really from within the AA, when I joined in 2017, that was the first point where DevOps had always been a thing I was very acutely aware of. It was in the industry. It was rising as a fashionable thing to talk about, but I'd never had any involvement in it. And I joined the AA, and we had a problem we needed to solve, and we brought in Zensar and my esteemed colleague Nikhil, and that was the first point where I realised actually there is something here. And this was all related to a project where we were we'd re-platformed Sitecore, and we were bringing back control of that platform in-house with Zensar as a delivery and a development partner. And the original challenge I was provided with by John Davies, the then head of development tests, was bring development in-house. A very simple 1-year objective. That was the biggest thing I had to focus on in that first couple of quarters. And the reality was that it wasn't as simple as just starting development with a team. We realized that through either ignorance or a lack of understanding, that we didn't own anything. We didn't own the development tooling, the continuous integration pipeline, the knowledge on how to deploy. It was all managed by a third partner. And at that point, the problem changed from bring Sitecore development in-house to bring Sitecore development in-house and build all this stuff. And that was when we brought Zensar in, as I say. Nikhil joined me along with Richard Ireland, who was then a consultant at Zensar. And we embarked on this first journey of setting this CI/CD stuff up. And it was at that point, I think for me, the penny really dropped. And I realized there was something here. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the opportunities that we saw and some of the achievements and how we recognize its success. And for me, it was instrumental in really saying, okay, this is interesting. This is something I want to spend a bit more time doing alongside my traditional delivery focus. And that's pretty much where it set off, really.
Absolutely. Perfect. And I do remember those long conversations we used to have at the Basingstoke office. So, Nikhil, let me come to you. And before you can talk about that journey, I want to take you a little bit farther back, because I know you of your past life before DevOps as well. So talk to us a little bit about that and tell us what attracted you into DevOps. What were you doing before your DevOpsy avatar, and how did you get started in this?
Yeah, so I started my career a decade ago as a IBM Lotus Notes developer, and I got a chance to play both hats, working as a developer as well as into the operations team. So kind of I started my career with both the flavors of both the sides. Okay, and so during that thing, from the initial itself, I had that passion towards automation and trying to do things better daily. So, with an example, like when I was in the operation team, automating monotonous tasks that most of the support team performs on a daily basis. I always had that thing into my mind, how I can do better, how I can deliver more efficiently, and how I can save time and utilize it at learning something more or doing something different rather than just doing it in a monotonous way. So yeah, I always had that gist, and basically the passion for automation and the zeal for doing things differently kind of made me like attracted more to a DevOps, and so I was presented with an opportunity to joining the DevOps team, where we started creating and doing some really cool and fun stuff with work as well. Like it was more about creating some DevOps labs across different tool stacks, and so yeah, that's how trying things differently and exploring the new things like cloud, be it AI, be it automation, things available. So that attracted me, and to be honest, it's keeping me very well motivated to continue and go further.
Perfect. I can see the happy faces. That's good. So you made a couple of very interesting points. You and Andy both talk about an attitude which you had, which we can loosely call a DevOpsy attitude. Right? It's a problem-solving attitude. It's being uncomfortable with the way things are. It's an inquisitive mindset, right? And that has probably led both of you guys into this journey. That's fantastic. The other thing I picked up, Nikhil, from your conversation is the ability of the organization to provide those opportunities, whether it's a DevOps labs, whether it's encouraging transitioning from a technology to B technology. It's the entire fabric of the organization to be able to support those individual pursuits. I think those are very important points. Thank you for that. So Andy, coming back to you, you've spoken about this Sitecore project, and that's where it started. But along the way, I think DevOps at A has come a long way, and there have been some struggles, there have been some ups and downs. So could you quickly take us through that journey and talk about what are the most significant business benefits that this transformation has provided to the A?
I think I'll probably do it slightly differently. I will answer that question eventually, but I'm going to do it. I think for me, we talk about the journey, and I think that's the most important thing to focus on. When I joined the AA, having that peripheral view of DevOps, but not really been engaged with it, and then transitioning to where we are today with a centre of excellence in operations. That journey really started with the Sitecore project. The onboarding of Zensar, into the team, and Richard and a number of others who I know are on the call today. And really for us, that DevOps journey almost happened purely by accident. We didn't set out down a road. And I know, Savinder, you and I talked over a number of months as we grew on this journey about, well, what does this look like? What does the enterprise DevOps look like? And it was never really at the forefront of my mind because I think I wasn't truly focused on it. But for me, as I say, when that penny dropped, I knew there was something there, but it didn't come out until we started to solve some of the discrete challenges we saw within the Sitecore world. And in hindsight, we probably did it slightly wrong if I'm really thinking about it. And the reality is that by building team, that in itself now I realize is the wrong thing. We did it because we wanted to solve a discrete problem. We wanted to solve Sitecore and create that pipeline and the release process. And it was a very kind of finite thing. We then went into some other opportunities around release processes for Pega. But again, they're very discrete project, short-term view. We weren't really intuitively focused on the cultural aspect, the idea of embedding DevOps and the way of working into the organization. And at this point, it was purely around just working in digital. At that point, everybody else was in traditional waterfall delivery, focusing on platform-specific virtual machines or physical tin. There was real, 2-3 years ago when I joined EA, there was no real cloud stuff going on. We were at the beginning of that journey. And I think it was only really because of the successes we achieved in the world of Sitecore that the organization and the senior leadership team led by Matt Lockheed from IT operations realized that there's a value in here in growing that expertise across the entire of the organization and taking the benefits and leveraging the skills and the capabilities and the patterns and trying to look at how we can make that work across the wider enterprise. So then going back to your question, which is around the benefits, so a little bit of a long way around. I think, for me, and Nikhil being instrumental on this is the Sitecore piece. So Nikhil, I'm going to throw it to you because you did all the hard work on this. Really, what the benefits were of the Sitecore work. Do you want to just take through everybody what we achieved over those first 6 months?
Yes, definitely, Andy. And as you mentioned, that Sitecore is something that's kind of first thing that we started at AA, and due to that reason, it's a bit close to our hearts and especially me. So basically we started applying DevOps principles, DevOps strategies to Sitecore build and deployment thing, and it helped us achieving and bringing the release down from 9.5 hours around to 3 hours business impacted. And so that was a significant achievement. And to talk about more, not only about the release timing, but also about how we have shifted the release from a manual-driven process to a fully automated process. So we initially had that process where we had 4 to 5 teams need to be available 2 days in a month because we had bi-weekly releases, and being it a geolocation, so it would be time difference and all. We successfully managed to automate bit by bit, and now today we are standing that we just need one person to press the button and it takes it all. That's the only thing that's required, and obviously the testing bit is there. But we have succeeded in eliminating those manual steps, and now those team are much more involved in doing some more productive work and some more different opportunities, stuff like that. So yeah, I think that's something I always like to brag about from Sitecore.
And I think, really for me, Savinda, was we talk about the business impact. I mean, the release process when I first joined the EA, when we first started looking at this, yes, the reality it was 9 hours in terms of the end to end from the point at where we physically pushed the button. But the reality was that the impact to the business was more significant, but also the ability to physically sign off the release typically extended into the next business day. I mean, we started at 10 a.m. because that's when our partner supporting us at that point started their day. In the City of London, agile teams, they start at 10 with a stand up, and then 10:30 we start the work. So we were already 5 hours out on our capacity to run with the offshore test team. So 10 o'clock is also the start of the business day for our content editors. You've got press teams, digital editorial, using a critical business platform. And the point at where we started that release is the point we brought in a release freeze in terms of content. So now you've locked out your business users for the majority of the day. Now, granted, for the most part, they would have admin tasks, they have planning, they can go and do other things. But on the idea that every 2 weeks, you take a day of productivity out of the business, made absolutely no sense. And then by the time you came to a conclusion of the release process in terms of the physical artifact deployment, you were talking at 6 o'clock in the evening, which means your offshore test team have gone home. In fact, they've gone home a long time before that. So invariably, we would have our post-live sanity checks done the next morning. Now, as anybody knows who sits in a service organization, that's not an ideal time to be suddenly discovering you've got some critical issues or any problems. The idea that you're now a full 12 hours after the release completion, you're now talking about impact and rollback. So, that was, for me, the business impact of all of those things, collected together. And by going through that cycle of continuous improvement over the best part of 6 months to get the first iteration out and own the platform, and then the subsequent 18 months to continue iterating and refine down, the fact that we've now gone from 12-hour business impact real world down to something like 4 hours total, plus the utilization of offshore working hours starting at 5 in the morning, means that the business impact is now barely half an hour, if at all. We utilize the best in terms of availability for offshore and onshore teams. And we've got a really resilient, well-orchestrated platform. And if we had our change manager on the call here, I think he'd be the first one to say that within the AI, we very rarely see any issues in terms of how we deliver that release. So I think all of that together has delivered a fantastic platform that we as a business can be proud of. It's a fantastic achievement.
Perfect. Thank you, Andy. So I think you guys have brought in a couple of very good points here. Andy, you spoke about embedding DevOps in the ways of working as against a separate team that sits in another silo. That's very critical. And also an end-to-end automation through all the processes, right? And the third was this iterative continuous improvement, which Nikhil Otto spoke about, start with bits and keep improving, ultimately getting down across the entire value chain. Right? And those are very critical, very important points. So Nikhil, I have a question for you. Let's say, couple of days, couple of months, all this lockdown business goes away and you're sitting in a bar with a couple of friends. Right? You define the friends, but we're imagining a good situation here, right? And you want to talk about 2 or 3 things, cool things that you did at AA's DevOps journey. What would those be?
Yeah, just slightly strict that I bring into the bar and order one Corona for myself with a lemon on top, and start bragging with three things that I really like about what I've done in so far is the first thing, which we already discussed. I name it as Honey, I Shrunk Up the Release. So, or here, honey is nobody but the term. But yeah, that's something which we already discussed a lot about. And yeah, we have really
I don't know, Nikhil. You did spend a lot of the times telling me on our weekly catch-ups that, hey, honey, I've shrunk the release a little bit more. So I think I'm honey in this relationship, if you want to say it.
Yeah, it was like
this is being recorded for your reference. Sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
so yeah, so that's the first time it's close at my heart. The second one I would talk about is how we managed to reduce our AWS bills annually by 40%. And the thing I like about that is so basically, if you go and talk about reducing AWS bills to most of the time, the most common answer you get are like, okay, go and buy reserved instances, go for shutting down the environments when not on use. Yes, so those are definitely the solution that you need to implement. But
Nikhil, one second. You're slightly breaking up. If you can come closer to the mic, probably folks can hear you better then.
Okay.
Yeah, let's try now. Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, I was saying that about not just going to the traditional way, but taking a bit of time, like not time, like a couple of hours or days to investigate where you are utilizing and where you are spending much, and then applying those strategies. So like the thing I liked about that was we started with smart environments. So of course the nightly shutdowns, but you also have environments that get spinned up based on a request on ad hoc basis. They get spin up only when it's required, so we don't have them running even into office hours. And things like when you, sorry if I'm getting a bit technical, things like cloning the repository on code build. You don't have to clone the entire repository, you just clone the head of it and things like it, which helps saving the NAT bandwidth. And when you have done this inside things, that's the place where you should be applying the blanket cover, which is like going for reserved instances, going for shutdowns and stuff like that. So with that strategy, yeah, we achieved that 40% saving across. And the third thing which comes to my mind is about developing the self-service capabilities. So this is more work in progress and some delivered stuff. But what we are currently working on is making the teams self-empowered and thinking about the dependencies. So be it like putting holding pages from an ops side, it's now in a POC where it's just a Slack command and you put a page on the production when you're doing a maintenance work. So you don't need an engineer to wake up at 2 a.m. at IST for putting up the holding pages, or having capabilities where service can self-heal themselves, like fixing the issues in a repeated pattern. So the service itself can record an incident, create a change itself, and then fix it by itself, and then creating a audit trail of that as well. So yes, that's the third thing. Capabilities in empowering not only the ops team, but the dev team as well by giving them different features like deployment capabilities all in their lead's hand and they can deploy it. So yeah, those are the things which I would kind of talk about some more.
Perfect.
But my Corona is finished.
I think for me, Savinder, the biggest thing in terms of the cost optimization was I mean, Nikhil talks very eloquently there about the basics, the must-dos that everyone thinks of immediately. You turn off your non-prods at weekend. Yeah, that's an easy quick win. But actually, by being so embedded in the delivery process and embedded in understanding the technology that we have and the ways in that the teams operate through the development and release cycle, I mean, that actually you could extend the opportunities for where you can make those cost savings. So again, this is probably where Nikhil will shoot me down for using the wrong terminology, but we typically had our build pipelines in AWS where we had CI release, continuous integration release, was running all the time. And we're incurring a cost on those microservices to manage that capability. Well, the reality is that's not a working environment that anybody ever looks at. It is merely a conduit in which to get us into our first non-prod environment. So by having that end-to-end understanding of how we develop and define and release, meant actually we said, Well, we only turn that on when we need it, when we do a commit, when we're ready to run that capability. So we then save the cost there. And it's that way of looking at the end to end in isolation as a process, and not just being fixated on the basics around buying a reserved instance or a spot instance. That, I think that's where the value is. And that really then ties back into previous conversation points around culture. And I think at the top of my intro, I talked about how when we started this DevOps journey, we brought in a team. And the team, even today, is sat in between the developers and the application support L2 guys. So we've not actually solved that cultural problem today. We now have 3 teams, and some might argue they're in silo. I mean, I don't believe we're as bad as that, but we are bridging that. But I think the real challenge for us in terms of our next steps is that cultural transformation within digital and within the wider enterprise, to get the developers and operators to be one and work on developing and tooling and operating the things they need to build things out. I think that's our biggest challenge. The second thing then for me was, I was going to think, the cost optimization was a fantastic efficiency for very little input at the beginning. And, we're certainly looking to do more on that over the next couple of months. The next benefit that I want to kind of talk through is chat ups. And I know Nikhil talked a little bit about that in terms of how you use chat ops to drive efficiencies in the release process, and turning environments on. But I'm really proud of the work we've done in Sitecore. And I think back to when we first managed a release process, whilst the majority of it was orchestrated through automated pipelines, push button all the way through, there was still a lot of manual handoff processes. So a particular artifact release would finish, and you would then, as an engineer, you would then, okay, it's finished. You then email somebody and tell them it's time for you to start. And there was always this lag and latency between all these steps, which contributed to an overly long cycle time. And then, of course, the thousands of emails per fortnight to manage this entire process. So the iterations over 18 months were to do the obvious things like, well, let's remove the network team from the equation. Let's automate the process of draining the load balancers so we don't have to worry about that. Build that into the pipeline. And then deliver chat ops so that actually it keeps everybody up to speed with what's being delivered, at what point in the phase you are. So you remove those handovers. And then what I particularly like about some of the work that Sandeep and my team delivered was the automated notifications, such that it tells you how long it's going to take, but then it updates you if it starts to extend in that timing, because we have the history. And what that means is you've then got a team who are sat there waiting. They can be working on things. They've got an idea of when they're starting. And the anecdote I always like to use here is there's nothing worse than being on a train platform waiting for a train, and the overhead board has no information. So you've no idea whether you should stay there for another 5 minutes, another hour. Are you going to get your train? So you have to make a decision based on no data. And that was always the problem here. Someone would walk off for a cup of tea or for lunch, and that's an hour out of your cycle gone. So by putting those processes in, that's how we've really driven down the time, because everybody knows at what point we're going to be at the point where we need them to be. And that's had the biggest impact for me. I know when the train is coming for me. And that's been, for me, the biggest win over the last couple of years.
Perfect. That's very good. You spoke about continuous feedback, which is really critical, and automating that through stuff like chat ops, which, gives you continuous alerts. And then you spoke a lot about culture change, which leads me beautifully into my next question. In this new environment, Andy, where you're not even face-to-face, where those water cooler conversations are not happening, where you're not bumping into people at meetings, how have you been able to drive effectively the culture change today? Some of the tips, some stuff that you've seen work, something that you've not seen work. Anything you want to share?
Yeah, so I think the reality is, I think the AA, and I'm going to talk specifically about digital because that's where the majority of me and my team's focus has been over the last couple of years. We've been in a unique position that if we think back to where we were in 2017, we'd just finished the first iteration of our digital transformation program. We'd implemented a number of new technologies in the business, namely Pega for our back-end fulfillment and CRM processes, Sitecore for our digital CMS, and but we still had a plethora of legacy platforms and capabilities with a lot of manual-driven processes, scripts, environmental instability, and lack of alignment. So all of those things meant that you had a need to have close working relationships and have people in the office and having those water cooler conversations and recognizing that, when things were starting to go wrong, you could jump on it and you work on it together as a team. I think what's really fortunate as a result in the last year is we've just finalized the implementation of the AWS project, so implementing all of our sales journeys and back-end systems into a microservice-based architecture in AWS, taking full use of VC to Fargate, EC2, ECS, I always forget. Nicola, correct me later. So Fargate and serverless computing. So the benefit for us off the back of that is we've had the option within that program from day one to get everything correct from the ground up. Everything is fully automated to the best we can get it. And admittedly, there's more we can do, but we're in a really fantastic position. So what that naturally means for us is that pre-COVID, things are really slick. You could easily work in a co-located office and move things through that release process through the water cooler conversation just by passing in the corridor. You have the right people. Because as an organization, we already partner with Zensar for delivery and development and other partners for test as well. We're not all purely located in one building. We're in Basingstoke, we are in London, we're in Pune, Hyderabad, Chennai. We are all over the world, but we are all co-located on our team. So again, that makes it beneficial for us to be working together. The challenge that coronavirus, I guess, has had for us, like anybody else, is we're now all remote. We are now all out of the office. And I think what I miss the greatest is being in the office and hearing things before they become a problem. And I think that's the greatest challenge. And I don't think we've entirely solved that. I think we're getting better at it. We're all starting to realize that the collaboration tools that we've got, Confluence and Jira and Microsoft Teams, are really helping us. But I think we've still got a long way to go. For me, the biggest thing in terms of post kind of coronavirus, COVID, is going to be about how I as a leader change. And I think for me, it means a couple of things. One is having my team have autonomy to do stuff, and that's based on a shared vision. And my team have a very, very clear vision that we've all worked on together over the last couple of years. We know exactly what we're trying to achieve. Whilst we not know how we're going to get there, we haven't worked how we're going to navigate to that end goal. We know the end point. So that means for two things for me, it means that me not being in the office means I'm not hearing my colleagues speak about something, that I can't jump in, that I can't kind of suddenly find myself micromanaging and over speaking. For me, it's a mental shift in the culture approach that I take. The flip side benefit is that now, with that shared vision my team have, the fact that I'm not sat behind them means that they have the ability just to get on with it. I'm not always there saying, well, what about this? We can just deliver it. And just by meeting on a daily basis, like any good agile team, we catch up, we review, refine, we have meetings when we need to, we take the use of collaboration tools to kind of have a continuous dialogue. I think for me, that's the biggest thing. And I think, if any learning comes out of this from any team wanting to invest in the ethos of DevOps, it has to be about the autonomy, the trust, and that shared vision, because those three things are really pivotal, that you all know what you're aiming towards and you can just keep working towards it.
Yeah, absolutely, Andy. And I think this entire COVID situation has brought in a very interesting shift in the entire DevOps space, right? So two of the customers that I work with here in UK, pre-COVID, we were talking to them about DevOps, and it was in the nice to have category. And suddenly in 3 weeks, both of these customers decided to start their DevOps journey, just because then it was no longer nice to have, it was a necessity. It was a must to have. So that changed in a matter of weeks. So Nikhil, I have a question for you. Now, Andy was saying that because of the work done at the AA, they were uniquely positioned, you know, if I can say, in a slightly safer zone in the COVID situation, right? But let's say if there is somebody in the audience today where they haven't given that much of importance to DevOps for whatever reason, their journey hasn't started, right? So somebody listening to this webinar, what can that person or that team do in the next 2, 3, 4 weeks very quickly to give them a jump start on DevOps? What's your 2, 3 mantras, 3 weeks, 4 weeks? What's a shot in the arm? What can get them started?
Yeah, so I would say don't try to implement it on a whole. Don't take a big leap. Always start step by step. And Richard Allen, who we started with, so he always used to mention me step by step, take a baby step. So and it's really that way you implement DevOps. So look at the quick wins, like look at which is the thing that takes more of your time, be it cost, be it your productivity, be it your delivery. So look at that and try to fix the major problem first and identify the quick wins. So yeah, looking at these things is, and then keep on improvising what you're doing. So for example, if you have fixed one problem of a thing that used to take X hours and now you have reduced it, fine. Make sure that it stays that, make sure you sustain it, and then move toward the next challenge. And yeah, I think be it any organization, be it any team, be it any project, this will be this you will always have these opportunities everywhere. You just have to find those and just start clicking them.
All right, perfect. Yep.
I was going to say, Savinder, as well, a couple of extra points on that as well, which I think really
sure.
is I talked about having a shared vision. I think we know the reality is that the AA and certainly me and Nikhil, when we first started on this journey in 2017, we didn't really know what the end goal was. I think, now we've got a very, very clear view of what we are trying to achieve, certainly within digital transformation. That is full automation, working very closely with test teams to deliver that. Providing the self-service capability, to have a fully hands-off capability where we can then go and work on the next big project, the next big opportunity. I think the greatest challenge in any organization, I think the AA is no more, is there's often a view that you have to really think about setting a very clear objective of what you're going to achieve. Like any organization, you want to, define a project, define the end goal, define all the requirements, define what it's going to cost. And the reality is with that is not really possible in the world of DevOps. The argument here is saying you need to fund a team who are just continuously working through an approach to reduce your cycle times or improve your automation, whatever that vision needs to be. Because you can't purely say what you're going to be working on at any point. We didn't know what we were going to be working on 3 years ago. We've got a broad idea of what the end goal is, but how we get there, as I said, is somewhat to be defined and it's not written in the sand yet.
Yep, perfect. So 2 key takeaways from this discussion. Step by step, take a baby step. Cheers to Richard for that. Thank you, Nikhil. And broad idea of defining the end goal, that nirvana state, what's that clear blue sky vision that you want to get to, and then fund the team to continuously make progress in that direction and incrementally deliver value in those small steps. And that value that you can measure, then you can kind of prove the ROI along the way. I think those are fantastic points.
Yeah. And I know we've got a couple of questions coming in, and I know Nikhil's desperate to answer the first one. So I just want to kind of wrap up a little bit with about 2 of the thoughts around the cultural aspect and the people side, because the people is really important as part of this. I talked at the beginning around having this siloed view of thinking, developers and ops, and then bringing in a DevOps team to kind of sit in the middle of some sort of sandwich, if that's a really good metaphor, maybe not. I think in terms of scaling up a DevOps journey, certainly for the AA, you've got to think about the people, and it can't just be about having a DevOps team. I do recall a conversation I had some months ago around, I'm going to probably just be a little bit vague on this. We have a problem. You did something 3 years ago. Can you come and fix it? And my view is, well, sure, we can come and fix it and help, but I think we're missing the point here. The DevOps COE is not about just an organization that kind of comes along based on a ServiceNow ticket to fix problems in the same way that an operations team fixes impacting incidents. The idea here is that I want to grow a cultural organization where you have a development and an application support team are defining and building and operating the entire thing together. And they have a shared backlog of how they do that. It isn't just a product ownership backlog of new features, because the features are great. You've got to get the features out and ship those to the customers. But if you can't manage that and operate it, then you're going to have an increase in cost to do that. By having all these teams. So I think that's probably the biggest thing that we've in the AA have got to deal with now is how do we sell that cultural piece? How do we bake that into our people management or people strategy and plans over the next couple of years?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of everybody almost talks about culture and the importance that there is. And like Andy, you said, not treating DevOps as a separate team, but embedding those elements in all of the teams and a shared sense of responsibility. Right?
And what's interesting with the AAs is I know we started on this journey for the last couple of years. We're now at a point where I've suddenly realized there are individuals within the digital application support team who suddenly, I think that penny's dropped for them. They've gone, hang on a second. As Nikhil said at the beginting, I'm doing this every week. I'm getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning to do this, to put this holding page up for a release. Well, why don't I just, and the ... and the dots are being joined up now, and you can see that thinking and saying, well, actually, I'm really proud because what we've managed to achieve there is embed that the desire to improve oneself and improve the capability, such that, like Nikhil said, you don't have to get up every morning and do the same repetitive task. So that's a really good thing. I think if anything that I've realized in the last couple of weeks is that suddenly there are key individuals who recognize the value of working in this way.
Yep, perfect. And I like to call that follow the rabbit hole mentality. If Alice in Wonderland hadn't followed the rabbit hole, she wouldn't have seen the things that she saw, and life wouldn't have been so interesting. So have that curiosity, right? Think about what you're doing every single day, and if you don't like it, if you find things are repetitive, figure out a way to change them. It might not be you who are doing that change. You might have to talk to somebody, get some help. But when you start talking to people, I've seen that in organization after organization, across geographies, that's the mantra. That's what happens. All right, perfect. So we've got a couple of questions. The first one. So is cloud migration, in a cloud migration journey, is there any role of DevOps? Is it just tools or much more to that? And when it comes to tools, should we go cloud native or open source? Any thoughts?
I can take that.
Yeah, go ahead, Nikhil. Take a shot.
Yeah. So yes, definitely the answer to the first question is there's a bigger role that DevOps has to play. It's not about bridging the gaps between Dev and Ops now. It has gone beyond it. It's being into architecture, making sure that we, as Andy talked about it in a few minutes before, like laying the base, the ground set really well, so that when you have to look or you have to kind of maintain this migrated projects, your base, if your base is all right, then it's an easy task. So call it DevOps, call it automation, call it observability, call it monitoring, continuous feedback, call it whatever you have to. But these are all DevOps tenants. And without this, migrating to cloud, won't call it a cloud migration. I would call it a change of postcode. Your data center has just changed from Farnborough to AWS postcode. So take the best of use of serverless, make your process repeatable. And that's what DevOps helps you achieve. And in terms of tools, I would say if you have the right culture and if you have the right process setup, tools are kind of comes very less. Like they're important, but much. The choice would to go in a different way. So yeah, I would personally prefer go cloud native and use their own pipelines. For example, if you're doing Azure, use Azure DevOps. They have a wonderful offering. If you're going AWS, go for AWS Core Pipeline Suites. And then from an enterprise level, always have enterprise level tooling and support from organizations to set up where you can have the right mix of tools. But whichever tools you select, make sure you standardize it across the organization. Don't go with one for this and other team using it. So standardization and governance is the key.
Yep, perfect. Andy, any thoughts?
Yeah, so I think I'm absolutely aligned with Nikhil on this. I think it does come down to preference, but also cloud native makes absolute sense for me as well. I think what also plays a part is, and coming from someone who also has to have a commercial hat on and think about the finances, is it makes sense to be cloud native where there's value because you're not buying additional tools. And I think any organization, certainly the AA is no different. We've all grown our systems organically or with sticky tape and plaster. Things grow and you build stuff, but you sometimes lose your way and you end up with a plethora of tools, whether you meant to or not. The danger is that as you migrate, as you get into your cloud migration journey, you just use cloud as a way of shifting your legacy equipment. I mean, that's natural. I expect that. You're not always in a position where you have the ability, as the AA did, to rewrite their entire digital stack and go cloud native. But the reality is I think by selecting cloud native where you can and serverless, because that feels to me to be more cost efficient, is also by saying, well, if we have to maintain a legacy base, is there an opportunity to identify a common tooling platform, whether that is on-prem or in cloud kind of VM based kind of capability and tooling? Because if you can optimize on that as well, in my head, you do a couple of things. One is you can be looking at reducing your costs to maintain support and license agreements on those tools. You also have the ability of sharing knowledge and sharing patterns across the wider enterprise. If I look at what we have today in the AA, I can think of 4, 5, 6 different ways that we build and release systems, that we manage artifacts, and that doesn't feel efficient, because as a DevOps COE, if there's any expectation that we have to manage and maintain that, we're gonna really struggle to manage that. So yeah, for me, cloud native absolutely, and standardization on tooling where it's possible, if that's available.
All right, perfect. That's a great answer. So we have about 12 minutes and I think more than 24 questions. So I'll pick the top ones, and there are a couple which are getting repeated. So one question which has come up 3-4 times: what's the difference between DevOps and DevSecOps, and what's the importance of DevSecOps really? Nikhil, you want to take a shot?
Yeah, I'll go for it. So there is, okay, so I won't call it as a difference because it's you won't be able to compare it, but I would say DevSecOps is an extension for DevOps as we know it. But the important bit of having DevSecOps is that it talks more about ingraining the security more towards the left side, even when you have an idea and start building that idea at a very initial level. So make sure you have tools like static code analysis doing the regular checks. Then you have the vulnerabilities tools, which does all the different top 25 and all that security scanning for you. That gives you a couple of things in terms of like making your services more secured. And in this cloud world, it really helps if you're doing DevSecOps, because there are many tools that are available that does most of the checks for you. Like few things here and there can turn into different things, but these tools that are available in DevSecOps line, they help you a lot in identifying them at an early stages.
Yep, sure, that makes sense. And I have a perspective on this as well, because I'm also in the process of co-authoring the DevSecOps course for DevOps Institute. Right? And there we like to call it the left shift of security. Right? Security was always thought of as a release and activity. There's a security team sitting somewhere, they define certain criteria, and you have to adhere to those criteria. You have to get a tick of everything before you can do the release. That was traditional. Now what we're saying is embed security right throughout the SDLC. Like Nikhil, you were saying, embed it in the developer's IDE, embed it in the CI server, embed it at the end of sprint testing, embed it with your performance tooling all the way across. So that by the time it comes to a release, it's a non-activity because you've already identified those vulnerabilities way ahead of the life cycle, even at the time of developers coding in. Right there, they say that, hey, this Apache library is not so safe, it has vulnerabilities. Don't use version 1.8, use version 1.4, stuff like that. And today there are a lot of tools in the market to do that. Okay, next question. With the advent of COVID and all of this, do you think DevOps will take off more than it has traditionally? Will organizations be forced to move into DevOps, and those who have implemented DevOps, is it helping them cope with the COVID situation, both in terms of DevOps and Agile? Is it helping for those who have done it? And for those who haven't, is it a good idea? Is it a strong enough proponent to start now?
I think I'll take this one. I think it's a strong thing to be doing regardless of the situation we're in. So I think if you have an opportunity to be starting on the journey, then you should do it. I think I talked about it a few minutes ago, in that we're in that unique position that we had already delivered a lot of the capabilities that you would expect within DevOps in terms of the automation and the release process, the governance processes. So I think for us, it has certainly helped because it removes all those manual touch points that you might see from the traditional approach for how you manage your build and release processes, where you have multiple players and stakeholders involved. So I think if you are in that scenario where you are an organization across a number of locations, whether that's the same city, geographic area, or continents, then absolutely, I think it makes absolute sense to start on that, especially where you can remove all those manual handoff processes. And I think the focus there is the wrong way. Regardless of COVID, this is about improving how you deliver, and you want to focus on your cycle time and your ability to go from an idea to release as quick as possible. You've got to think about the end goal for the customer. That's a really big proponent of this for me. It's how I can make sure any product owner can get a feature out the door as quick as possible, and how we can support and accelerate that is really key.
All right. Nikhil, do you want to add anything?
Yes, I'll second what Andy has said. And basically, we have seen in this COVID situation the rise of cloud-based products and organization migrating to cloud. It's been evident that Amazon business has shoot up in this, and Azure business have shooted up in this situation. So, and links back to the cloud migration question asked before. So to migrate to cloud, you need to have things like DevOps, things like Agile in place, and you have the foundation ready to get most of the benefits of the cloud offerings. So yeah, so it's a blog that I've written a few weeks back, like be calm and do DevOps. And it has an addition to saying that be like Bill. Bill's team does DevOps. So have a look at it. You'll have more answers.
Andy, were you saying something? Sorry.
I was pre-reading a question and thinking about my answer. So I'm going to answer it.
Go ahead.
So, I mean, this was a question about why are companies racing to implement CI/CD, so continuous integration, continuous deployment, or delivery, however you want to term it. It's interesting. If anybody's read, there's a number of stories, the Phoenix Project, etc. I think there's examples of where people have been delivering things through automated methods. Admittedly, not using the tools we have now, not having cloud native technologies, but I think we've been doing it for longer than we think. I think that's all that's happened is there's been a cultural shift in the way you approach it, and the tooling has changed, but the the methodology or the idea of using CI/CD, I think, has always been there. I mean, how long has Jenkins been around? How long have other build kind of artifact tools been around? I don't think that's changed. So I think the idea that companies are racing to implement, I'm not sure I totally agree with that. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, Savinda?
No, I agree with you, Andy, because one of my first jobs back in 2000, I was called a build jockey back then because I was creating software builds. DevOps, the term DevOps hadn't been coined at that time, and we didn't have Jenkins. We had our own custom CI engine, homegrown, built in. But now, when I think about it, we were doing a lot of these things that we talk about today. They were all custom written, homegrown, but still following the same methodology. Yeah, we were doing maybe one release in 6 months, but the concept was still the same. Now you have to do a release every 6 seconds if you're Facebook, but not everybody is Facebook, right? Not all the real enterprise, the large enterprises that we talk today, they are not cloud native. They still have monolithic systems. So a lot of these still hold true. Okay, so we just have 4 minutes and one last question. What's your advice to somebody who's just getting started in DevOps or who's been in this journey for a while? How do I upskill myself? 1 or 2 pieces of advice. Nikhil?
Yeah. So just quick and add 3. So be passionate. Be passionate about automation and try to do things better every day. Second, I would talk about the culture bit and the curiosity bit. So be curious about how things are working, because DevOps, it's as we mentioned, that it's not about one tool or thing. Today it's Azure, you would be working on AWS. Yesterday it was EC2. Today it's serverless. Tomorrow something else. So that will change, but you do have to have that curiosity. People refer DevOps guys as the Wikipedia, and they think that, okay, go to them, they knows it all. So yeah, it's good. It's good to have that challenge. So be curious. And third one is get your basics right. Be it anything, if you have your fundamental, your foundation right, it would be the best thing.
Perfect.
Savinder, you have a good book written, so I would refer to go through Savinder's book as well. And if you are
I thought you would never tell them.
It's a wonderful book. I have read it, and it's an awesome thing if anyone is interested in starting a career over there.
All right, perfect. Andy?
Yeah, it's something more to add on that. I think the key thing for me is really the culture and the people. As Nikhil said, the tooling will change, it will shift, but the way in which you approach it is key. It's the individuals that are important. And I think, really, Nikhil and Savinda know me more than anything now, but I'm very much a people person. So I can't be on this call without really recognizing everybody who's worked across the EA over the last couple of years across a range of projects. Nikhil, Richard, Jamil, Sandeep, Bhavana, Om, Ram, fantastic team, always wanting to learn, really wanting to challenge themselves. And that's really important to me, is giving opportunities for people to challenge themselves and continuously learn is really important. So thank you to my team for supporting me.
Thank you, Andy. That was really powerful. Thank you. And we just have 2 minutes of closing things. My thoughts on this: follow the rabbit hole. Remember Alice from Wonderland, and read my book. It's called How Do I Build My Career in DevOps? It's available on Amazon worldwide. And I was like, my daughter was telling me yesterday, Papa, now I can buy you on Amazon. So that was pretty interesting. Any closing thoughts, Andy?
No, I think we've discussed a lot today. I mean, I don't know if there's an opportunity to look at all the questions that came through and perhaps answer those privately back out on a public forum. I'd really like to do that, because granted, we sound like we got a lot of questions, but not a lot of time goes for the answers. I think I'd just like to thank you, Savinda, for allowing myself and Nikhil to join this session today on behalf of Zensar. It's been a fantastic collaboration with the team, across DevOps and development, with the entire support of the Zensar leadership team. So thank you very much indeed, much appreciated.
Thank you, Andy. Nikhil, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, so the first one was about culture, but we have talked a lot about it. And the second one is about setting the right process and keep amending the process until they work delivering value for you. So there's no harm in amending the process, and you can't get it right the first time, it's all fine. Make sure you keep it amending until you have hit the nirvana state.
Perfect. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Nikhil, for taking time out and doing this webinar. I'm sure we discussed a lot of important points. People have raised a lot of questions, and I would urge, those questions that we couldn't answer, all three of us are available on LinkedIn, Twitter. You can shoot the questions there. Whenever we have time, I'm sure we'll get back to you. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Nikhil, and great having you here. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Cheers now.